Welcome to the Sleep Carriage. My name is Dev. Tonight we're settling into a Viking winter. It's not glamorous, not heroic, and honestly, you probably wouldn't survive this, but that's exactly why it makes such a cozy story. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the creak of roof beams under heavy snow. The air inside the longhouse is smoky, damp, and full of the faint tang of last night's fire. The hearth at the center has smoldered down to glowing embers, little red stars that barely warm the room. Your nose is cold, your hands ache, and you tuck them under a rough wool blanket that smells faintly of sheep. The world outside is all wind and frost, but here, the sound of breath, your family's, even the animals stabled at the far end creates a rhythm of life that is oddly comforting. A Viking longhouse in winter is less epic adventure and more endurance test. You wake up not to sunlight, but to smoke in your eyes. The air is thick, almost syrupy, because the hole in the roof meant for letting smoke escape is clogged with snow. Great. Another day of watery eyes and a sore throat. You're not alone in this. Everyone coughs, everyone complains, and still everyone shrugs and goes about it. The walls are timber and turf, dark with soot and glistening where the frost creeps in. Your feet touch the earthen floor hard, cold, and sprinkled with hay. You hear the soft shuffle of animals. A cow shifting its weight, goats bleating faintly, a chicken protesting the cold. They're not exactly pets, but in winter, animals are part of the household warmth, whether you like the smell or not. Someone stirs beside you, maybe a sibling or a cousin. Sleep is light here, never fully restful, because the fire needs tending, and because the wind never stops moaning through the thatch. You wonder, as you always do, how many more weeks until the thaw. Some historians think Viking winters built a kind of toughness that defined the culture that when you grow up with months of darkness, you carry a deep patience. Others think people just complained a lot and survived anyway. Probably a little of both. The morning routine isn't really morning. Time blurs in these months. The sun crawls up late and sinks quickly, so you measure the day less by light and more by chores. Your first task is to coax the fire back to life. You poke the embers with an iron rod, blow softly, and listen as sparks catch onto kindling. Soon, flames lick upward, orange and steady, the sound like soft rain. The smell of burning wood fills the longhouse, mingling with everything else. Sour ale in a wooden cup, old straw, damp woolen clothes that never really dry. It's not luxurious, but it's survival. As you sit near the fire, rubbing your hands, you notice how your breath curls into little clouds. The rhythm of winter life is slow but demanding. You'll eat, you'll mend, you'll haul water, you'll listen to stories. And between all that, you'll just wait. Wait for the ice to melt, for the boats to move, for life to feel like something other than smoke and snow. Still, there's comfort in the sameness. There's comfort in waking to the same sounds. The creak of beams, the coughs of family, the steady munch of a cow chewing through hay. You glance at the roof, snow pressing down, and wonder if it will hold. It always has, but you keep wondering. That's winter part endurance, part faith. Your stomach growls, but breakfast can wait. Right now, you sit with the fire, letting the warmth slowly creep back into your fingers. Outside, the storm rages, snow piling higher against the doors. Inside, life continues, quietly, stubbornly, like it always does in a Viking winter. You rub the sleep from your eyes and lean closer to the fire. The flames are finally steady, and in their glow, someone places a wooden board with a few hunks of bread. It's dark bread, dense and heavy, made from barley or rye. The crust is tough, the inside chewy, and though it fills your stomach, it never feels like quite enough. You bite anyway because there isn't much choice. Beside the bread is dried fish. Thin strips, salty and stiff, the kind that keeps for months. You chew slowly, the taste sharp and briny, and you imagine the warmer days when this fish was pulled fresh from the sea. Back then, it was cooked over open flames, tender and steaming. Now, in the middle of winter, it is more like leather. Still, it keeps you alive. And of course, there's ale. It's not the sparkling, golden drink you might imagine. No, this is cloudy, bitter, and always just a little sour. You drink it anyway because water has a bad habit of turning foul if it sits too long. Ale is safer. Not tastier, but safer. Some say even children drank it, not enough to make them stumble, just enough to keep them from thirst. You glance around. Everyone eats in silence. The only sounds are the crack of wood, the shuffle of feet, and the slurp of liquid from clay cups. Meals aren't grand affairs in winter. They are survival: bread, fish, ale, sometimes porridge if there's grain to spare. If you're lucky, a bit of butter. If you're very lucky, a slice of smoked meat left from the autumn slaughter. Your teeth ache from chewing the hard crust, and your fingers fumble with the brittle fish. You think, half in jest, that if Thor himself came down from Asgard, he'd probably ask for a proper breakfast. But here, in the longhouse, no one complains. You eat what you have, nodding at the quiet rhythm of it all. Some historians believe Viking diets were surprisingly healthy, full of grains, fish, dairy, and occasional meat. Others point out the scarcity of fresh produce in winter meant long months of scurvy-like aches. Maybe both are true. Maybe you were healthy but also tired, always a little tired. There's one more smell wafting near the fire: onions. They were harvested months ago, braided and hung from beams, and now they're soft and sweet when roasted. You bite into one, and it warms your mouth with a sharp, earthy flavor. Better than bread, better than fish, just enough to remind you of warmer months. The meal ends as quietly as it began. A child licks the last of the butter from a wooden spoon. Someone wipes crumbs from their beard. You place your empty cup down on the floor, listening to the faint sound of rainwater dripping from the roof beams, melting snow sneaking in. It's not a feast. It's not even satisfying, but it's routine. And in a Viking winter, routine is comfort. You stand, stretching your stiff arms, and feel the cold rush back into your joints. The longhouse may be warmer than outside, but it still feels like a cave of frozen air. The chores are waiting. They always are, and today is no different. Your first job is hauling water. The well is half frozen, and every bucket feels heavier than the last. The rope is rough in your hands, your palms already raw from the season. When you lift, the bucket bangs against the icy stones, sending little shards of ice floating on the surface. You curse under your breath, then haul it anyway. Great. Another day of frozen water to splash on your boots. Carrying the bucket back through the snow is a balancing act. The ground is slippery, the path uneven, and one wrong step means icy water spilling down your legs. And yet, you've done it so many times it almost feels like part of the morning rhythm: bucket, step, balance, bucket again. Some historians imagine Vikings as hardened warriors, always charging off to raid. But the truth is that most days looked more like this. Chores, cold, small victories against ice. The next task is mending. Nets that were pulled in before the frost need patching. Ropes fray, wooden handles split, and tools break with the cold. You sit on a stool, threading twine through worn holes, your fingers clumsy and red. The smell of tar and old fish sticks to the nets, sharp in your nose. You mutter at every knot that slips loose. It's not glorious, but without it, there would be no food in spring. Nearby, others are busy too. One scrapes frost from a doorway with a wooden shovel. Another checks on the livestock, brushing snow off the goats' backs. A child chases a chicken, the bird flapping and protesting, until both collapse in a heap of feathers and laughter. The sound is brief but bright. a rare burst of joy on a long winter day. You pause, leaning on your hands, watching your breath curl in the air. The longhouse stands solid, smoke trailing from the roof hole, but everything else is locked in frost. The landscape stretches white and endless. The sea is frozen, the fields empty, and the horizon blurred with falling snow. Some say this endless cycle of chores is what bound Viking families together. Others argue it simply wore people down until they could barely think of spring. Both seem true. You feel both at once, pride in survival and weariness at how survival looks. Still, when you tie the last knot in the net, there's a flicker of satisfaction. Small, yes, but real. You've done your part. You've fought the cold and won, if only for the morning. And then you sigh, knowing there will be another bucket, another net, another frozen tool tomorrow. You step out along the narrow path between houses, boots sinking into the snow. The air outside stings your cheeks, sharp as knives, but you breathe it in anyway. It smells cleaner here than inside the longhouse, though still heavy with smoke from every hearth. Each household has its fire going, and the village is wrapped in a foggy haze of wood smoke, hay, and damp wool. The path itself is little more than a trampled strip of snow, twisting past low turf walls and fences patched together with whatever wood was at hand. You hear voices, a neighbor calling to his goats, a child coughing, the clang of someone splitting frozen logs. Everything feels muffled under the snow, as though the whole village is speaking in a whisper. You nod to a woman hauling firewood. She nods back, her breath clouding in the air. No one lingers long outside. The cold is too quick to bite. Instead, people move with purpose, quick and focused, before darting back into the warmth of doorways. A dog trots across your path, thin and scrappy, for damp with frost. It sniffs at your boots and shakes, scattering flakes of ice. Somewhere nearby, another dog barks, deep, insistent, then quiets again. Dogs are both guardians and companions here, though they probably smell as bad as the goats most days. You pass the pens where animals are kept. The smell hits first, a sour blend of manure, straw, and warm bodies packed close. It's not pleasant, but it's life. Without the animals, there would be no milk, no wool, no meat when times were lean. They chew, grunt, and shift in the straw, their breath steaming in the frigid air. Overhead, the sky is pale and low, as if pressing down on the village. Snow falls lightly now, drifting in lazy flakes. The rhythm of it feels timeless, as if the same snow fell on your ancestors and will fall on your descendants. Some historians think Viking settlements were dreary in winter, all smoke and mud. Others insist there was beauty in the quiet, in the shared endurance. You look around and decide both must be true. Past the pens, you hear laughter from another longhouse. Someone is telling a story, their voice carrying even through the heavy walls. You catch a phrase about a journey, about silver coins and foreign sails. The sound makes you smile, though you don't stop to listen. Stories will come later, by the hearth, when the chores are done. For now, you walk the village path, your boots crunching in the snow, your breath clouding the air, your world reduced to smoke, wood, and white. And somehow, despite the cold and the hunger, there's comfort in knowing everyone is trudging through the same winter alongside you. You make your way back toward the longhouse, boots heavy with snow, when you catch sight of an old farmer leaning against a fence post. His beard is white with frost, his cloak patched in more places than you can count, and still he stands with the stubbornness of a pine tree. He mutters under his breath, words half prayer, half grumble, and though you can't hear every syllable, you know the names: Odin, Thor, Freyr. He's not alone in this habit. In the long, gray months, people cling to whispers of the gods. Every crack of thunder is Thor's hammer. Every raven that circles overhead is Odin's eye. Even the faint sprouting of green in spring is credited to Freyr. You've grown up with these stories, so they feel as natural as the snow itself. Still, when you see the old man tracing a symbol in the frost, you wonder how much is faith and how much is desperation. You walk closer and he nods toward you. His voice is hoarse, slow, but steady. "Keep a charm on you," he says. "The winter is long. The gods may listen, or they may not." Then he shrugs as if both outcomes are equally likely. Some historians argue the Norse faith was less about strict belief and more about habit traditions woven into daily life. Others suggest it was fear, plain and simple, a way to make sense of the storms and sickness. You decide as you listen that maybe it was both. Later, back inside, you take a scrap of wood and begin to carve. Nothing fancy, just a small shape, maybe a hammer for Thor or a bird for Odin. The knife slips once, nearly nicking your finger, and you curse softly, but you keep going. When you finish, you hold the charm up to the firelight. It's rough, uneven, more like a child's toy than a holy object. But you slide it into your pouch anyway, because who knows? If the gods are watching, maybe they'll appreciate the effort. Around you, others make their own tokens. Some hang bits of bone over the doorway. Some weave patterns into their belts or cloaks. A few tie knots in strips of cloth, muttering as they do. Small things, almost superstitions, but each one carries a quiet hope. The wind rattles the roof beams, a hollow moan that makes everyone glance upward. The old farmer's words echo in your mind. The gods may listen, or they may not. You close your hand around the charm in your pocket and think, well, it doesn't hurt to ask. The day drifts on, gray and dim, until the door of the longhouse creaks open and a figure slips inside. She is wrapped in layers of wool and fur, her face lined and weathered like cracked leather, her eyes sharp even in the firelight. A murmur ripples through the room. Some call her a seer, a woman who carries whispers from the other side of the veil. Others say she's just clever with herbs and good at guessing the future. Either way, no one ignores her. She shakes snow from her cloak and settles near the fire without asking. That's the way of it. A seer doesn't wait for permission. She lays down a pouch, spills its contents across the floor. Bones, bits of wood, and tiny carved symbols. The sound is soft, like the clatter of dice, though the faces around you watch with a seriousness that says this is no game. You lean closer as she stirs the pieces with her fingers. The bones are worn smooth, the wood blackened with soot. She closes her eyes, lips moving silently, then begins to speak. Her voice is low, steady, like a chant carried in the wind. She talks of journeys delayed by storms, of a ship that will not sail until the thaw, of a feast where too much mead is spilled. You glance at your neighbor. He smirks. It could be coincidence, after all. And yet, when the seer picks up a bone, studies it and says, "Beware of the wolf that comes when no one expects it." You feel a shiver that has nothing to do with the cold. Wolves do come, now and then, hungry and bold enough to edge into the settlement. Or perhaps she means another kind of wolf, a man, a hunger, a betrayal. Some historians think seers were masters of ambiguity, their words shaped to fit any outcome. Others argue they truly believed the threads of fate were woven in these rituals. When she finishes, she sprinkles ash over the bones, whispering to bind the words in place. Then she gathers them again, tucking them back into the pouch with care. Around her, the room exhales, some relieved, some doubtful, all slightly unsettled. As she rises to leave, she glances at you. For a moment, her gaze is sharp as flint. "Keep your charm close," she says, as if she somehow knows about the rough carving in your pouch. Then she pulls her cloak tight, pushes open the door, and steps back into the snow. The longhouse falls quiet. Only the fire pops and hisses, filling the silence. You tell yourself it's nothing, just words, just coincidence. But when the wind howls again through the beams, you slide your hand into your pocket and close it firmly around the charm, just in case. The seer's visit lingers in your mind as the evening deepens. The fire has burned down to a bed of glowing embers, sending out a steady warmth that seems to anchor everyone together. You stretch your legs, feeling the stiffness in your knees, and glance toward the benches lining the longhouse walls. There, families huddle close, shoulders pressed together, sharing the rhythm of the night. Children curl against their mothers, eyelids heavy from too much running and too much stew. One little boy clutches a small wooden horse, its head worn smooth where his thumb has rubbed it again and again. Beside him, his sister whispers a lullaby learned from her grandmother, her voice just barely louder than the crackle of the fire. It is not a polished song, more a drifting chant, repeating lines about rivers that freeze and rivers that thaw, about a sun that sleeps but always returns. You watch as heads tilt, bodies soften, and the song takes hold. Even the men, rough from work and weather, sway gently in time. The longhouse becomes its own cradle, rocking softly to the pulse of voices and flame. Some historians think Viking songs were as much tools of survival as they were art. With no clocks, no written schedules, it was rhythm that guided life, rowing to the beat of a chant, weaving to the pattern of a tune, rocking children to the same melodies their ancestors knew. And when winter pressed hardest, these lullabies carried hope like a hidden ember, tucked deep in the heart. Of course, not every song is solemn. Soon, a youth pipes up with a verse that pokes fun at the neighbors downriver, claiming they fish more boots than salmon, that their women laugh too loudly, that their goats eat everything but grass. Laughter rises, shoulders shake, even as one elder mutters that jokes like that have started feuds before. Still, the teasing feels safe here, within the thick walls and the long night. You rest your head against the wooden post behind you, letting the sound wash over you. Voices rise and fall, overlapping, weaving into a fabric of comfort. There's a kind of hypnosis to it, the same words carried by countless winters past. You think again of the seer's words, but they soften in the lull of the moment. Whatever wolves come, you tell yourself, they will find you surrounded by warmth and song, with laughter close at hand. Your eyelids grow heavy. Though you don't quite sleep, you drift in that gentle space where words turn to murmurs and time loses its edges. The fire sighs, the longhouse breathes, and you, caught between the two, feel yourself rocking softly, as if the very timbers of the house are humming you into slumber. The lull of voices fades as the fire shifts, sending sparks into the smoky air. You blink awake, though you were never fully asleep, and find the longhouse quieter now. Some children have been carried off to nests of firs at the far end. Others dream with heads heavy against their parents' arms. But the night is far from over. A man rises slowly, joints creaking like old wood. He carries a carved board under his arm and a pouch that clinks softly. You recognize it at once. The game is sometimes called the King's Table. In the dim glow, he scatters smooth stones and carved pieces across the board, and soon others gather, eager for the distraction. You lean closer, curious. It is no simple game of chance. One side must protect its king, surrounded on all sides, while the other seeks to capture him. The rhythm is thoughtful, careful, each move considered. Someone mutters that this game has been played longer than memory, brought over the sea by ancestors who may have rolled dice from knucklebones and stones. Some historians say it was the chess of the North, teaching strategy and patience in a world where storms and raids left little room for error. Of course, patience isn't always the virtue it's made out to be. One man, frustrated at losing, slams his palm against the board, scattering pieces into the rushes. A ripple of laughter follows him, half mocking, half sympathetic. Someone points out, with a smirk, that he loses more gracefully at sea than on land. He shrugs, muttering that at least the sea doesn't cheat. Meanwhile, another pastime takes root by the fire. A young woman pulls out a spindle and begins to spin wool, her fingers moving so quickly and fluidly that you find yourself hypnotized by the rhythm. Thread unspools like liquid, gathering on the distaff in neat coils. She hums as she works, her tune light and careless. Some say that when wool was spun in the longhouse, it was more than just work. It was a charm against the dark, a way to keep the threads of life itself from fraying. You breathe in the smell of lanolin and smoke, the rough tang of wool mixing with the softer sweetness of pine resin crackling in the fire. There is no rush here. The longhouse seems to stretch out the hours, like a great hand smoothing wrinkles in a cloth. And then, in the corner, a small drama unfolds. A boy has stolen one of the dice from the game board and rolls it across the dirt floor, grinning each time it clatters. His father pretends not to notice, though his lips twitch with amusement. Some historians argue that dice in Viking times weren't just for play but for divination, tiny cubes holding fate in their tumble. Tonight, however, fate is kinder. The boy's laughter chases shadows into the corners. Around you, the air feels heavier with warmth, as though the longhouse itself has curled up beside the fire. You notice your hands resting easily in your lap, your shoulders loose. The games, the songs, the small quarrels and smaller victories, they blur together into a single rhythm, like the tide pulling in and out. You tilt your head back and stare at the rafters. Smoke lingers there like ghostly rivers, twisting and curling before slipping out through the vent at the roof. The timbers groan softly as if shifting in their sleep. You realize that in this house, at night, time is not something sharp and restless. It is something round and soft, a wheel turning quietly under the snow. And so you let yourself drift again, lulled by the murmurs of play and the gentle rasp of wool being spun, while outside, the endless night of winter presses close but cannot come in. You stir when the door curtain flutters, a cold gust slipping inside. A man stumbles in, stamping the snow from his boots, his beard frosted into white icicles. He carries something slung over his shoulder, wrapped in cloth, and at once the air of the room shifts. People lean closer, voices softening. For what he carries is not meat or wood but a set of bones, smooth and carved. They are not bones for food, nor for tools, but for telling stories the gods themselves might whisper. These are runes, each marked with a symbol, sharp and angular. He drops them with a clatter onto a board near the fire, and at once, the longhouse is alive again. You inch closer, drawn not by belief, but by the soft drama of it all. A woman sits before him, hands folded, her eyes bright and steady. She asks what the winter will bring, though surely she already knows the answer. Snow, storms, hunger, and the long patience of cold days. Still, she wants to hear the shape of fate. The runes scatter, some face down, some face up. The man hums under his breath, as though the rhythm of his voice itself gives meaning to the way the bones have landed. He mutters about journeys, about something lost and something gained. You hear the word WYRD, fate, woven like threads on an invisible loom. Some historians think these readings were little more than entertainment, the way dice rolls and card games still are. Others argue that in a world as unpredictable as this one, it gave people comfort to imagine that even chaos had a pattern. A child watches, eyes round, and whispers to her brother, "Do the runes ever lie?" He smirks and answers, "Only when they want to." You hide a smile. It is a good answer and perhaps the only one. The air in the longhouse deepens with a hush, as though every creak of wood, Every crack of fire is part of the reading. And yet, beneath the solemnity, there's a ripple of amusement. A man coughs into his hand and mutters that if the runes are so wise, they should tell where the last keg of mead was hidden. Laughter breaks the tension, spilling across the benches like warm honey. The rune keeper glares, but his eyes glitter with humor. Even fate, it seems, can laugh at itself on a winter's night. Later, when the readings are done, some of the runes are passed hand to hand. Each person traces the cuts with their fingers, as though the grooves themselves hold a quiet hum of power. You too let one rest in your palm. It is small, no heavier than a walnut, but it feels older than the snow outside, older than the fire, older perhaps even than the longhouse itself. There are murmurs then of the old saga stories of the Norns, those three women said to weave the destiny of every man and woman. Some say they carve fate into wood as easily as the rune carver scratches a line into bone. Others doubt it, rolling their eyes. And yet, in the glow of firelight, in the hush of the longhouse, you almost believe it. The smoke curls, the runes are gathered back into their pouch, and the longhouse exhales. A few people drift toward their furs, comforted or perhaps merely sleepy from the ritual. The games fade, the laughter softens. Still, something lingers in the air, a sense of threads being tugged just beyond sight. And as you sit back, your eyes heavy once more, you realize the strange truth. It doesn't matter whether the runes tell the future or not. What matters is that they fill the night with wonder, with a shared breath of mystery, with the soft idea that even in the deepest dark, the world might still be listening. The longhouse is quieter now. Children have curled against their mothers. Men slump against the wooden beams, and even the hounds have ceased their restless shifting. The fire is low, embers glowing like tiny suns, their crackles fading into the rhythm of sleep. You lie back, the rough fur beneath you warm from bodies pressed together, the smell of smoke still in your hair. Outside, the storm has not relented. The wind claws at the roof, snow piles against the walls, and the sea groans beneath its sheet of ice. But inside, there is peace, fragile, imperfect, yet real. The longhouse is its own world, sealed against the cold, and for this one night, survival feels enough. Someone, half awake, begins humming a lullaby. The tune is low, swaying, more vibration than melody. The words are in Old Norse, rough to the tongue, yet somehow soft in their repetition. The song is about a ship sailing across night skies, its sail catching starlight instead of wind, carrying the dreams of all who sleep beneath it. No one remembers who first sang it, or whether it was meant for gods, for warriors, or for children. Tonight, it belongs to all. Your eyes grow heavy. You think of the day's weariness, the endless tasks of survival, the strange rituals and games, the warmth of stories that seem to bend time itself. You think, too, of those who came before you, and those who will come after, generations linked by these same nights, these same fires, this same balance of hunger, laughter, fear, and hope. Some historians argue that Viking winters were nothing more than long months of suffering. Cramped bodies, dwindling food, darkness that pressed too close. Yet as you sink deeper into stillness, you see it differently. Here is a kind of endurance wrapped not only in hardship but also in beauty. The beauty of voices joined in song, of runes scattering across a wooden board, of children daring to laugh at fate, of neighbors sharing what little warmth they have. The longhouse sighs as another log settles into coals. A thin shaft of moonlight slips through a crack in the roof, silvering the smoke as it rises. Around you, the last voices murmur into dreams. Perhaps they dream of raids across the sea, or of gods walking among mortals, or simply of spring returning with its green promises. And you too drift at last. You are no longer a visitor here but part of the longhouse itself, one voice among many, one breath folded into the sleeping air. The winter will be long, yes. The nights will test you. But for now, in this moment, wrapped in fur and firelight, lulled by the storm outside, you rest. The last thought before sleep claims you are not of fear or hunger, but of belonging. Belonging to this winter, to these people, to this strange, fleeting, glowing warmth against the dark. The embers fade, the night deepens, and you, at last, let go. The fire inside the longhouse fades into quiet embers now. The storm has eased, and only the soft whisper of wind carries through the rafters. You have walked the length of this winter's night, from the gathering of neighbors to the tales, the games, the songs, and the silence. And here, at the end, you find not just the Vikings of long ago, but also yourself calmer, slower, softened by the rhythm of their lives. The world of the past drifts further away with each breath you take. The sounds of laughter, the scratch of runes across a board, the crackle of smoke, all dissolve like snow under sunlight. What remains is the stillness, the warmth, and the simple truth that even in the harshest winters, people found ways to endure. They found ways to belong. And so do you. Let your body feel heavy now, as though furs have been laid across you, thick and comforting. Let your mind grow quiet, like the sea frozen in winter, held in perfect calm beneath the moonlight. The longhouse becomes only a memory, and then even the memory fades, leaving you floating in the space between waking and dreaming. Breathe slowly. Release the day. There is nothing left to carry. As you sink deeper, know that you are safe, you are warm, and you are part of something far greater than yourself. A story that stretches across centuries, linking all who have ever sought rest when the nights grew long. Sleep well tonight, let go gently and drift into dreams.
you.